SOT West, Burrow Team. Coming at you from NTC, Off the Radar.
This is Off the Radar. I'm Captain Weston Rich, an observer coach trainer for the Green Berets at the National Training Center.
Psychological operations soldiers are the masters of information dimension, dispensing mind bullets, that's your term, and providing and proving in the modern era that the pen or tweet is mightier than the sword. How do PSYOP soldiers prepare for this information battle? Does NTC or the National Training Center provide realistic and challenging training for PSYOPers? Welcome to Off the Radar. I'm your host, Captain Weston Rich. With us today to discuss these questions and more is Captain Eric Plummer, the current PSYOP Observer Coach Trainer, Team OIC, here at the National Training Center. Captain Plummer, please provide a little background on yourself and your experiences in special operations and at the National Training Center.
Hey, thanks, Wes. I appreciate you having me on. So a little bit about myself. I've been in the Army for about 16 years, 4 deployments in that time, and about 6 of those years I've been in special operations in PSYOP, with 2 deployments during that time. So I've done a myriad of jobs in the Army. This is like my 5th job so far.
Not your standard officer approach. So just give us a quick rundown. You were National Guard at first, right?
So I started off in the West Virginia National Guard as a Cav Scout. Went to Iraq as a Cav Scout, and then came back, went and reclassed to supply for a little while. And then during that time, I was obviously, going to school and commissioned as a ordnance officer. After that, so went to EOD school, spent some time as EOD, and then as a freshly minted captain, switched over to SOF.
All right. So deployed as a Cav Scout, right? And then deployed as a PSYOPer. A little different, huh?
Yeah, quite a bit different. Time frame too was there was a large gap. It was like 2009, Iraq versus like back in the Middle East, like 10 plus years later.
Yeah, I imagine ROE and just the general atmosphere kind of changed.
Yeah, quite a bit different.
And the enemy changed too, because your last rotation was focused against ISIS in Syria.
Yeah, I mean, it was that, and really just any kind of extremist group. Really, we didn't really have. It was a unique experience because we didn't have like a specific AOR. Yeah, we were based out of CENTCOM, but we kind of were looking like, across the globe.
Oh, really? Wow, that's so pretty big reach. For just a captain and a couple other PSYOP NCOs. Huh?
Yeah.
So what kind of is like your biggest takeaway from how you guys fit into the whole special operations enterprise and how what you do in the information space matters?
I think first off, a lot of people don't know really what we do. And I think we as a branch really do kind of a bad job of advertising that. So a lot of times the first problem you'll run into when you show up anywhere is like, the commander or staff or whoever you're working for is like, cool, we have the PSYOP guys. I don't really know what to do with you. So, do, whatever it is that you do. So really it's on the units that are to go and kind of create that understanding right off the rip. And I see that here at NTC quite often too, is like, we get a lot of young teams showing up. And they know what they know from the schoolhouse, and that's about it. So one of the things I always tell them is like, hey, when you get here, just go find the commander, go find the sergeant major, and the the important folks in the room, and just tell them what you do, right? It doesn't have to be like this super rigid, like, oh, I influence people using the 7-step PSYOP process, blah 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 blah, whatever. No, don't do all that. But that's probably one of the biggest challenges you face. I think we can do a little better job of that as a branch, whether that be recruiting, because I know when I first came in, I luckily I'd known a couple folks that were in PSYOP when I did my packet to switch over. So I had a little general idea of like what PSYOP did, but most people have no idea until they actually show up to the qualification course, and they're like, oh, okay, we do these things. So yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to touch on that. Hey, go meet the commander and tell them what you do.
Yeah.
Comment. I think that's invaluable for any particular MOS or military occupation, especially to include special forces, because like conventional force or anyone only has a really good understanding of their specific job.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get an attachment or you get somebody else, they're like, I don't really know what to do with you. So if you don't have the ability to go tell that commander, senior enlisted, hey, I can do XYZ for you, but I can't do A, B, and C for whatever reasons, that's going to make your job so much easier because you're immediately setting expectations instead of just like, hey, I'll try to get in where I fit in.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we kind of see that here at the National Training Center with civil affairs and psychological operations in particular, showing up, augmenting SF companies, and some companies know how to manage those enablers and those other RSOF soldiers really well, and some struggle at it. So not just something for a PSYOPer to know, but like anyone, you got to go, when you're with another unit, you got to be able to talk to that commander, that senior enlisted, and provide expectation management like right off the bat. Yep. Otherwise, you might just be sitting on security or pulling fires. I can't remember. I think, was that a PSYOPer doing fires?
That one rotation? Fires guy.
Yeah. We'll back up to your PSYOP deployments. Were you a team leader during those? Were you on staff? Did you have a mix? Like, what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was kind of weird. So I was, at the time, I was a detachment commander. So, I had my 3 PSYOP teams, and we were supporting multiple different units at the time. So I had to divvy out each team to kind of a different unit. And then where I was at was I was acting as the J39 for the task force. So typically,
so you were kind of dual hatting as a detachment commander and a staff officer.
Yeah. So
tough position to be.
Yeah. So usually that's like a position held at the level I was at. It's usually like at least a major or lieutenant colonel position. So in reality, like my peers, I'm using quotation, we're mostly like majors and lieutenant colonels at other task forces. But it was cool though, because like, in SOF, that's one thing that I really do appreciate is when you're put in those positions or you're the subject matter expert, rank is really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. And you'll run into onesies and twosies here and there and be like, okay, yeah, why is this captain talking to me? But for the most part, everybody's there to do one thing and get the mission done, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, for sure. I've definitely been in situations in SOF. Rank is irrelevant. If your knowledge and experience merit, you to be in the room and talking, then you get to have a voice. And sometimes you go to other organizations where that's not the case. And then we'll dial it back for one more question before we get more into this National Training Center focused conversation. Like, why did you want to be a PSYOPer? Like, how did you find out about PSYOP, and then what made you choose that instead of something else?
So I was deployed. It was my second deployment as a EOD platoon leader. We were, again, back in the Middle East, based out of Kuwait. And my team specifically was, we had some dudes in Syria, and then I was in Qatar. It was a very weird layout. But our battalion commander was a PSYOP guy. So he was, so that's kind of like it's the Brigade Special Troops Battalion. That's a full-time position in Kuwait. So he was that battalion commander for that battalion. And it's kind of like a hodgepodge of like all the weird, units. It's like, hey, we don't know what to do with you, so we're just going to throw you in this Special Troops Battalion. So yeah, it was a Colonel Young. He's I think he's still currently serving. Okay. So that was about the time that, for our year group, like once you're starting to like look at captain, that's when they're like, hey, at this time you have, here's your 6 months or a year or whatever to put in your packet. And I was really weighing it because one, for EOD at the time, it's not its own branch for officers. You fall under logistics.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
career-wise, it's like it's kind of weird.
Not many EOD companies.
Yeah, there's not many EOD companies. So you go to, as an EOD officer, you go to the logistics career course, and then it's just like kind of
Long
chance.
pipeline.
Yeah. It's just chance that you go back to an EOD company. Otherwise, you're going to go into the logistics field, which isn't a bad thing. But like, if you've spent your years as a lieutenant, as an EOD officer, you're going to be kind of behind the power curve compared to your peers. But anyways, and I'd always kind of had aspirations to go into SOF later on.
Okay.
And once Colonel Young found that out, he was like, "Hey, come talk to me." So I went and spoke with him, and he kind of gave me the rundown. And so then I put in my packet shortly after that, and got the email that said, "Welcome, congratulations, you're going to selection when you get back."
Nice. Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool. So, looking for a different avenue, having a good mentor. Luckily, he was your battalion commander at the time. That's awesome. I think, totally biased. I haven't worked too closely with that many PSYOPers, so small sample size. But I'd say you're the best one I've worked with.
Thank you. One of one.
One of one. And you've definitely helped share a lot of insight with me throughout the year that we've worked here at NTC together. So like as your time, so give us a quick rundown of the tactical PSYOP detachment, like how's that structured? And then your experiences being a team leader, detachment commander. Did you ever come to NTC or Joint Readiness Training Center? And what training looked like while you were in PSYOP operationally versus what you teach, coach, and mentor here at the National Training Center?
Yeah. So we previously, when I was back in the regiment, prior to coming out to NTC, there was a delineation between like, you had your regional PSYOP teams and you had your tactical PSYOP teams. So like every battalion had like a Charlie company, and that was like their tactical company. And then you had a tactical battalion, which typically supported only the tactical mission, right? And that's the battalion I was a part of. But the other regional battalions, it was really just based off what the mission set was, right? So your regional battalions, they have like their rotational basis that they're going to their region, whether that's like South America, Africa, like whatever. And they're mainly working for the country teams there. And then I think the major difference is with a tactical unit is they're going to like combat zones.
Okay.
Right. So we've kind of slowly gotten away from that to where it's not like a tactical versus regional, and now everybody's just kind of the same. Okay. It's just a matter of like what mission you're going to support.
So when you say tactical, you don't mean like the tactical operational strategic level construct where you're like out there doing tactical PSYOP with a loudspeaker trying to convince the enemy that there's a battalion of tanks maneuvering.
I mean, kind of, it is, but like, we've been in this bubble of GWAT for like, whatever. We're now closing that out to focus more on like the LSCO, the large scale combat operations.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this may be just my ignorance, but I think that's like tactical level. Yeah. Like going from tactical, operational, strategic, all that stuff, right? Like, but my opinion is like the tactical teams, they were always focused on kind of like CENTCOM, like counterterrorism type things. Whereas the regional folks, like, I mean, we did have a CENTCOM regional battalion, but
regional tactical focused entities or units were doing a myriad of information domination kind of operations.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. That's like really, you talk to any PSYOPer and everyone's going to tell you something different, right? Like you can have 3 teams go do the same mission and it's going to be 3 different things.
Yeah. I would say that you talk to anybody and their experience, they could rip out with one unit and have a completely different experience in the same exact region, no matter what their mission is, or their branch, whether they're a Cav Scout or their SF or their PSYOP, they're going to have a different experience because the people they're working with are different.
Yep.
At least on the military side, the locals will most likely stay the same unless there's a big influx or bunch of people leaving. But that
environment changes over time.
Yeah. And and I could be wrong, tactical PSYOP detachment is roughly 12 service members, right?
Yeah, it recently changed. But yeah, so it's you have your detachment leadership, which is a master sergeant and a captain,
Okay.
and then you have your 3 teams.
Okay.
Yeah, so now it's if it's still the same, I've been away from the regiment for a year now. But yeah, so then when I was leaving, they were changing it to a captain, a master sergeant, and in senior E7 as your kind of like
Head shed.
high 3,
Yeah.
right, for the detachment, and then you would have 3 teams of 3.
And then do you have a designated medic like
No,
SF and
no.
CA?
So that's that's one topic I've talked to a lot of guys here at NTC about that I think is kind of a detriment to PSYOP, right?
Yeah.
Because in SF, obviously you have the 18 deltas.
Yeah.
CA, they have folks that go to the SOCM course, so they have their own organic medics.
Yeah.
PSYOP doesn't. PSYOP has PSYOP, and then we might get some attachments of like folks that are like specialists when it comes to like creating media or whatever, but we don't have medics. So what that means is everywhere we go, including like tactical level things, we're reliant on whatever organization we're a part of to provide that security and medical support.
Yeah. So from the PSYOP qualification course, are all the NCOs minted as the same
Yep.
MOS?
Yep.
Okay. Cool. And then when you were in the operational PSYOP, what did training look like? Did you ever go to a combat training center? And then how does training, what does the rotation look like for a PSYOP unit?
Yeah. So my individual experience as a detachment commander, we had pretty free reign to develop our own kind of training pipeline. And NTC or the CTC rotations were kind of like a tasking that came down.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to me coming here, it was like you rarely saw PSYOP come out to one of the CTCs. And when they did, it was like a small contingent, right? It wasn't hardly ever you'd see a full detachment come out. But yeah, so my team, we didn't go to a CTC rotation, which I kind of regret, because I think now being here, it's super beneficial. Like regardless of what your mission set is, just coming out and being in an austere environment, going through the steps of the PSYOP process, doing your planning and integration with the unit is super beneficial, right? But yeah, so our training pathway prior to the deployment was basically on me, right?
Mm-hmm.
The commander came down and was like, hey, I'm giving you this block of time, get your guys ready.
Did you get like a mission guidance letter or anything? Training guidance?
No, not really.
In any written form?
No, I did not. It was kind of a weird situation because our unit had just picked up that mission. So we'd only had a couple of teams go and support it, and it was like changing every time, right? So we kind of just had to do our own research and figure it out.
So you had something on the horizon. Hey, we're going to deploy for 6 months or something.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be prepared for that specific thing.
Yep.
Instead of an ambiguous, hey, what does the next war look like? I mean, that's the construct of the National Training Center and the Joint Readiness Training Center is like large-scale conflict operations. What is it going to look like if we go fight at peer near peer? And we're going to train units accordingly versus at home station. A lot of times, special operation units have that event horizon, something on the horizon.
Yep.
They're going to go and they're going to execute something
very specific.
Yep. So they're training towards that.
Yep.
So that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. So I did my own analysis and figured out what it is my guys needed to do to be successful at that specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, my team was broken up into 3 separate mission sets. So we all had, it was very weird because the only real collective training we did was kind of like a make-believe, certification exercise at the end so that we could have that stamp of approval from higher to say, hey, yes, you're ready to go.
Yeah. So I imagine that a lot of your training would involve, trying to influence people is difficult if you don't have any people. Trying to get out in the information environment is hard if there is none, training wise that you can use unless you're using the real world. So you must rely on role players even at home station or constructed social media like we have here at the National Training Center? Like, is it hard to get that kind of stuff when you're out at the operational unit doing home station training?
Yeah. One thing, like even here, like replicating an information environment is a monster, right? Like, I mean, you look at the modern era of like social media or whatever it is, it's like so organic and it's unpredictable, right? And going back like at home station, which back at Fort Liberty, it's really just about how clever can you be like in developing your training. Like I reached out to some of the of our sister battalions who had like foreign officers working there, and had them come in and like, hey, like, can you act as this individual role player or whatever it is, and during this training exercise, and they were super helpful about that. But like here,
but that's great. But if you're setting that up, you're not getting training yourself.
No, the team was.
You're getting work and how to plan and coordinate, execute training, but you're not receiving the training. As the commander.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. But that's like the great thing about the CTCs is that's all the work's done for you, right? Like all you need to focus on is like, what do I need to do to prepare, to execute this mission that is the CTC rotation, and then integration with whatever unit you're going with. So knowing that now, right? Like, cause I went to NTC twice, but that was once as a Cap Scout and the second time as EOD. So completely different, right? And back then, like one time I was a PB2, right? So like I had no idea what was going on the whole time, right? I'm just like, it does what it's told. And then the second time, I was a brand new lieutenant, just graduating the EOD schoolhouse, showing up. So again, had little to no idea of what was really going on.
So what is the goodness of a PSYOP, TPT, TPD, tactical PSYOP team or detachment coming here and integrating? Like they get to work with an SF company. I mean, they obviously get in a awesome observer coach trainer. But what else? Like, I mean, we have a somewhat fake, we have a fake information environment. So like, why don't we just like?
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit.
Explain what we have here for them.
Yeah, so I think first of all, like coming out to NTC or JRTC, right? Like you're away from home, right? You're with a bunch of your team, and then possibly a unit you've never worked with before, and then in an environment that's not very permissive, right? JRTC, you've got all the mud and swamps as we experienced a couple months ago, and then here, it's this environment out here, and it's hot, war cold in the winter. You're driving in the desert at night, sleeping out of your truck or on the sand, with limited connectivity, even with some of the things that we have. So talking about back to the information environment, so here we have a few things that we provide to kind of replicate the information environment. One being, like you said, the synthetic internet, or what we call ION. We have a cell phone network that's closed network here at NTC. We have media teams that circulate the battlefield, that have like folks that'll come up and put a microphone and a camera in your face and be like, hey, why are you in my country? And then also like we have like print newspapers, and we have an actual news channel that plays that the folks can dial into.
Yeah, a radio station too, right?
Yeah, radio station, that's right. We have all these things to kind of replicate that. And then also we have, civilian role players that are out in the towns, and, the folks can, teams can interact with those folks, which is about, I feel like, in my opinion, about as good as it gets. Obviously, there's always room for improvement. But I think we do a pretty good job of creating an information environment here at NTC.
Yeah, and then you also have like, they could bring, I think we have the ability to get loudspeakers and different things like that if units so desire that kind of stuff.
We're like, I know, so us specifically as Burrow, like the SOF element here, we don't have those yet. I know Ghost team has some stuff,
Yeah.
some gear that teams can draw, and that's mostly for the reserve side that support the conventional units that come out.
Yeah, I know that's not like soft
Yeah.
PSYOP realm, but like just as an example, they could coordinate potentially
absolutely
for that kind of stuff
Yeah.
if they want to dabble
yeah.
with that.
But I mean it is a soft side thing. You know, my team, you know, we had loudspeakers, we had, you know, the ones that you mount on your vehicle, and then the dismounted version. The team, but that really boils down to the team and their analysis prior to coming out. Like, hey, what equipment do we need to bring?
Yeah.
And what I see quite often is one, either the team is just kind of tasked or told that they're coming out here pretty late in the game.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't have much time to do the analysis, or two, they do have time, but in their analysis, they're like, hey, there's no reason for us to bring these things. And it's just, you know, me now has seen like 7 or 8 rotations, and I see the benefit of like bringing out, you know, a loudspeaker or whatever. And then other teams, you know, it's on the team to kind of do the analysis of what they bring.
I mean, everybody that gets here gets on our social media, Ion stuff. A lot of them try to leverage the radio station. I think everybody's in the cell phone network, the box phones, and doing like pulse style messaging.
Yeah.
That's pretty popular. Leaflets are pretty popular on the good and the bad guy side. Our red PSYOPers have used leaflets pretty effectively.
Yeah.
So like the EW and the cyber and like the tangible material, like you can use all that while you're here, and that might not be something that you have the ability inside of one training exercise at home to do.
Yeah.
And then I liked where you're going about like, hey, they might get tasked with this last minute. Like, so in a perfect world, they know they're coming or they volunteer to come, you know, far enough out. Like, what are your recommendations to prepare? And then like, once they're on ground, what's it going to look like?
Yeah. So first thing would be obviously find out who you're coming out here with, right? So out here, the way that we kind of, the construct works is, you know, you'll have like either a PSYOP detachment or a couple teams, and they usually get embedded with the Special Forces AOB.
Yeah.
So like figuring out, okay, who's going to be the unit that I'm coming out here with, and then integrating with them as early as possible, right? Because that's just going to make things easier for you, right? And then 2 is do the mission analysis, right? You receive, or we push out, you know, products to these units prior to coming out, and for them to be able to do their own analysis and kind of war game how they're going to attack the problem before they come out. So if you're waiting to do that until you get here, that's probably the wrong answer. So that preparation piece, and then just reaching out, like, you know, I'm more than willing to, you know, pick up the phone or answer some emails and like answer questions prior to these guys coming out here. Obviously I'm not going to give them the answers to the test.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I mean, just do the research, reach out if you have any questions. If I'm not here, then, you know, my replacement, I'm sure, will be the exact same.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And then, bring out everything you can, right? Equipment wise. Cause I mean, I'm one of the guys that's like, I overpack and over prepare for everything. Because I don't know like what's going to come up. It's unpredictable. And especially out here, like you don't know what's going to happen, and we change it. It's ever changing. Right. So yeah, bring all your equipment if you can.
In this episode, we covered what psychological operations is, some of the tools that PSYOPers use, and recommendations on how to prepare for a rotation at the National Training Center. In the next episode, we'll take a deeper look at what a rotation looks like for PSYOPers.
Thank you for listening to Off the Radar, where RSOF prepares for conflict.
You have been Off the Radar with Sandy West.